Hello, my name is Kinsman. I'm a regional director from the Pacific Northwest, and I work with a company called Vergent Software up there. I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about using Enterprise Library to create forms authentication in ASP.NET 1.1 in 10 minutes or less. So let's go ahead and take a look. What we have here is basically a website built in ASP.NET 1.1 that we want to go ahead and add some authentication and role-based security to. So if I click, for example, on the user link, I go into a directory that has some user content in it. If I back out and I click on the administrator link, I go into a directory that has some administrator content in it. Now I want to throw forms authentication on top of this as quickly as possible. So what we're going to do is we first have to go ahead and create an authentication database. So we'll jump into SQL Query Analyzer, and we will use a tool or a script that comes with Enterprise Library. If the file menu will drop down, and we'll pull up this script that we're going to use to create the security database. We'll go ahead and run that. This is what comes with Enterprise Library. It's not something that you have to generate. We'll go ahead and jump over to SQL Query Analyzer, and we'll make sure that we get some permissions set right on it. We'll go into the login because we're going to use some integrated security. And we'll go ahead and set it up so that the ASP.NET account can go ahead and access that particular database. So now we've got the database behind it set up. Let's create some users real quick. In Enterprise Library, it comes with a tool called the Security Console that we're going to go ahead and use to go ahead and enter some initial users in that database we just created. So we'll drop this down. We'll say we're interested in connecting to the security database. We'll make that connection. Have to wait a moment or two as it connects to my database. Let's create some users. We'll create it me. If I can spell my own company name right. Once I'm created, we'll create another one. We'll just call it user so we can differentiate between the administrator and the user. And now we'll go ahead and we'll create some roles. We'll create one role called user, and we'll create another role called administrator. And now we'll go ahead and throw some users into those roles. We'll map me, Kinsman, into the administrator role, and we'll map both users into the user role. So this is a tool that's provided for you to do this so that you don't have to write this yourself. Once we're done with that, we'll go ahead and close it up. We've got some users and roles defined within our database. Now it's time to jump into VS.NET and do the additional pieces of work. So the first thing that we need to do is go ahead and turn on forms authentication in web.config, just like you'd normally do. So we'll jump into web.config, and we'll just comment out the Windows authentication section. And I've already got the forms authentication section piece in here, so we'll go ahead and drop that in. Now the only other piece we'll change in web.config is we'll also have some pieces that will go ahead and tie those paths that we just looked at down to particular roles that we've already defined within our database. So you'll see here that I've indicated I'm only going to allow the administrator role into the administrator subdirectory. The user role will allow both the user and administrator roles into that particular directory. At that point, we're done with web.config. We'll go ahead and close it up. And now we have to actually write a login page. So we have a login page all set up here called login.aspx. There's nothing behind it. In fact, if we jump into view code, we'll see that it's just an empty page by and large with the controls already in here. So let's go ahead and drop the code in here that we're going to need to use to go ahead and authenticate the user. So we'll drop in. One of the first things that we're going to need to do is go ahead and create an identity object. So we'll create an iIdentity. We'll save that because we're going to use that actually as an output variable in just a few moments. The next piece that we need to do is we're going to need to use Enterprise Library. Now the problem is I don't have Enterprise Library at this point referenced in my solution. So the next step is to go ahead and add those references. So I'm going to go in here and pick Add Reference. It should bring up my reference dialog. I'm going to browse. I'm going to go to where Enterprise Library is actually installed. Come on, my mouse isn't quite working here. I guess I'll just type. There we go. We're into Enterprise Library. We'll go into the bin directory. And the ones that we need to pick up are some of just the basic ones. We'll pick up configuration. We'll pick up security database, security, and also the one for authentication. So it's 4 assemblies that we're going to go ahead and pick up, pull into our project. We can just go ahead and collapse those references now because we're all set there. Just to make things a little easier, we're going to go ahead and throw a using statement up here that's going to refer to what we just pulled in so that we can go ahead and use the types directly. And now we'll go in here and we'll set up. We want an if I could spell it right, cation provider. We'll call it provider equals, and we'll use the authentication factory to get an authentication provider, in this case called the database provider. And then once we've got that authentication provider, we're then going to use it, and we're going to call it, we're going to say if, one more step. We also have to create a set of credentials. We'll create a name password credential. And this is what we're going to put our username and password inside of. So we'll pick up for this textbox1.text. Didn't get text. CodeRush tricked me there. And then we'll throw in textbox2.text, which is our password. Once we've got that credential, now we can go ahead and use the provider to actually authenticate the user, passing in the credential that we just defined, as well as the identity that we defined up earlier on. Now, if that returns true, that means we went ahead and authenticated the user successfully. If it returns false, we had a bad authentication. So we'll just write out some little error message saying something like login failed. If it worked, now it's time to go ahead and tie into Forms Authentication and call, if I can spell this one right, Forms Authentication, redirect from login page, specify the username. Well, the username came back from my authentication call, and whether or not we want a persistent cookie. At this point, we've gone ahead and defined everything we need to do to go ahead and authenticate the user. I'd say, I don't know, that's about 8 lines of code at the very most that you would normally have to write. We get to leverage all of the authentication pieces that are essentially in the enterprise library security block. Now, the other piece we need, obviously, is the role-based piece. So we're going to jump now into global ASAX, and we'll jump into authenticate request, and now we're going to have to go out and grab the role information. This time, instead of actually writing it all from scratch, I'm going to go ahead and do a little Julia Child move here, and we're just going to grab the code out of a text file real quick so we can paste it in. We'll go ahead and grab this. We'll go ahead and jump back to our global ASAX and drop it in. And basically what we're doing here is we're making sure that we're authenticated, and if we've been authenticated, to go ahead and get the forms identity that was used to authenticate it, then call upon Enterprise Library to get a list of roles that are associated with that identity out, and then map those into a principal, essentially, and replace the built-in principal. So at this point in time, we're almost completely done. The only piece that we really have left is we need to do a little bit of configuration. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up the application that we were just working with, open up its web.config. We'll tell Enterprise Library that we're interested in using the security application block. We're interested in using the database authentication provider, and we're interested in using the database role provider. At this point, we're just about done. We need to create a hash provider that we'll actually use for hashing the various usernames and passwords. That's all done. We have to go into the database and specify where the database is going to be at. So our database name that we created was called security. The server name was localhost. And then we just need to go down and specify we want to use that database provider and that hash provider. Just need to do the same thing for the roles. Jump down to the roles, indicate that we want to use that database provider. Okay, we'll go ahead and save this thing out. At the point that we're saved out, we're all ready to go now. We'll refresh our page that we looked at earlier on. At the point we go ahead and refresh it, we'll go ahead and click on user, and what do you know? We go ahead, we get the login. We'll go ahead and use the user login the first time that we specified in the tool. Are we getting a login there? Oh, you know what? I bet you I forgot to recompile. That would be a good thing. Did my compile work? Or did I fail? Oh, I forgot to put a namespace here in my global ASAX. I was a bad kid. So we'll just go in here, practices, enterprise library.security, do a compile. We're now good with our compile. We'll jump back to our browser. We'll jump back to our home page. Once our home page loads, We'll click user. We'll specify user@virginsoftware.com. Specify the password. Oh, we had a problem, actually, it looks like, with security in our database. I thought we had fixed that. Let's go in here and take a look. We'll go into palouse.asp.net. We'll make sure the database we have privileges on. Oh, I forgot to check owner. There we go. We'll jump back. We'll try that again. We'll do the button. There we go. We're in the user page. We'll back out. If we try the administrator, it's not going to work. We'll specify my account, which we map to the administrator group, specify the password, and we're in there. So at that point in time, that's how you go ahead and use Enterprise Library to integrate security into ASP.NET 1.1 in about probably 12 minutes or so. Thank you. Good deal. Thanks, guys. Thanks.